I'll start by kind of trying to put everything you heard so far in context of how does this OCUDU thing fit in the broader world of open source software. I will start with a brief reminder about who we are at the Linux Foundation in case you just crawled from under a rock and never heard of us, or were just too afraid to ask what is it exactly that we're doing. So don't worry, I'll quickly cover that. Our mission statement is to create the largest collection of collaborative open software in the world. And what we are is a nonprofit organization, and we focus on building ecosystems that support and promote the success of the open source projects. Now, when I say projects, of course, the name suggests the Linux kernel, but now there are well over 1,000 projects that are hosted by the Linux Foundation. What you see here is just a small fraction of the logos of some of the projects. And the way we organize things is we have what is called sub-foundations that group together projects with some affinity and let them share resources and work more collaboratively together. For example, OCUDU is going to have its own foundation under the Linux Foundation. Other related foundations are Linux Foundation Networking, Linux Foundation Edge. But the fact that a certain project belongs to a specific foundation doesn't mean that it's limited to collaborating with only that foundation. It's just a matter of efficiency. And of course, projects collaborate all the time across the board within and without and beyond the boundaries of the Linux Foundation. So this is, I think, that's the most important slide I have today. If you have to pay attention to one slide, this is the one. And this summarizes what we do and why we do it. And it's basically also can be titled the difference between just code on GitHub and a successful open source project. The four things you see here are based on kind of the common knowledge of many people over many years of what makes open source projects successful. And successful means that they get wide adoption, that they have are being used, that people are happy to use them, and they're gaining more and more end users. So think about, the Linux kernel was mentioned this morning, but things like Kubernetes, PyTorch, all these great things that so many people use and rely upon, they all have these four things in common. And neutrality, I think, is rather simple. If you see something on GitHub that is kind of hosted and backed by a single company, you're always, you don't have guaranteed that this company would not change their mind, go out of business. And we've seen examples of this happening recently with companies changing their mind about the commercial license. HashiCorp and others were very famous stories recently, and they do what's called a rug pull, where they suddenly change the license while people are relying on the open source project, creating shockwaves and creating an unnecessary situation where people can no longer rely on the project and need to scramble to find an alternate solution. So when projects are hosted by the Linux Foundation, you're free from worrying about that because the project is forever hosted by the Linux Foundation and not by a single entity that can change your mind. The other thing is IP clarity, namely clear license. Code on GitHub is not enough. You need to have a clear understanding about how you are allowed and not allowed to use the software. So all the successful open source projects have a clear license. In the case of OCUDU, that license, as Paul mentioned, is going to be the BSD3 close open MPI, which is basically a very permissive BSD license with a clarification clause saying that you're not granted rights to use the patents involved from the technology, and you need to license them separately. That's kind of, in my non-lawyer terms, that's basically the gist of that license. And the next two things I'm going to go into detail more over the next couple of slides, but open governance and democracy is another important thing that makes projects successful, meaning they're allowing people, anyone, to contribute, to add things, to change things. This bureaucracy thing is not, you won't find it in the dictionary. It's just a word we like to use. But in a nutshell, it means that things are getting decided by doing stuff. So I know a lot of you have telecom background. In telecom background, there are standard organizations, and decisions are made there by how persuasive you are and how willing you are to deliberate discussions. But in the open source world, yes, there are some discussions and committees. But at the end of the day, if nobody is actually developing the code, things won't move in the right direction. So I think someone asked this morning about some specific feature of integrated access. So once OCUDU is an open source project, that could be proposed as a feature by the community. And if there are developers who are willing to do it, and if in general it follows the direction of the 3GPP, then it's most likely to get incorporated into the project and become a feature. So this is how things happen. And I will go into details about the exact control mechanism of how it works on a daily basis. And then finally, there needs to be a financial support system. I mean, some people might still have the impression that open source software is developed by barefoot hippies that just want to do good for the world. So there are some niches where it still happens, but most of the open source software you can think of, Kubernetes, PyTorch, Linux kernel, is developed by people who are paid by their organization to write the code and contribute it. And that whatever they're working on is aligned with the commercial business of their company, and it at the end of the day supports that business and the growth of that business. So if you want to make OCUDU successful, we need to make sure that there is part of the ecosystem, a group of companies that are actually commercializing the technologies, doing business around the technology, and that creates that kind of flywheel where we have more end users, that leads to more contributors, and so on. In a continuous manner, the community grows based on that, and it needs to have that commercial aspect of it. So I will, that's just to feast your eyes with some of the numbers of the different assets and communities and projects that are supported by the Linux Foundation so far. And before we dive into the details of OCUDU, I just want to kind of double click on one of the sub-foundations I mentioned, Linux Foundation Networking. So these are some of the projects that are either hosted by the Linux Foundation Networking or closely collaborated by, and I'm expecting that the OCUDU project will have a lot of close collaboration with these projects, among others. So let's double click into what is this foundation thing that we're building. So the mission, as I kind of hinted, of the foundation is to create this public-private ecosystem around the technical project that will lead to more adoption of the technology and more contribution, obviously. And what this foundation will focus on is obviously housing and hosting the technical project that is based on the seed code coming from srsRAN, and also hosting and nurturing all these collaborative type of things that will help build enlarge the ecosystem, bring in more end users, and bring in more contributors. So this is, I think Joe showed another view of the foundation, but this is another way to look at it. And this is kind of who we expect to be part of this foundation and who's going to do the certain actions. So we have obviously the initial performance, SRS and DeepSeek, but we hope to see more over time. And then we at the Linux Foundation will provide the platform for all these type of more collaborative things like blueprints and integrations. And that would grow with the help of everything you see on the right side, all these other players that will join the ecosystem. So just to kind of quickly repeat, because Joe already showed that, this is kind of a day one view of what we see the roles and responsibilities of the different players in the ecosystem. That could change, obviously, over time. We can see more contributors and more end users, but this is at least on the kind of day one where we think that foundation will start from. And the question that comes to mind is, okay, why should I join this foundation? So from, especially from a research perspective, these are some of the benefit for someone who uh, works on RAN technology or open RAN technology. These are some of the things that you can get from being a part of this foundation. What you see on the right is just a list of some of the research organizations we are already reaching out to. And if you don't see your organization's name, you can reach out to me later, and we're definitely trying to be as broad as possible and get on board as many uh, players as possible from the get-go. And another type of players we are planning to have in this ecosystem is, of course, the end users. And in the case of OCUDU, as you heard from Joe, these type of government organizations are going to be representing a big chunk of the end users, but it's not limited to these organizations. So over time, we expect to see more and more end users from different industry domains. But to begin with, this end user aspect of things is kind of skewed towards these type of government organizations. And another question that comes to mind, okay, the fund, there's membership funds. Where does the money go to? So these are some of the things that ecosystem funds usually spend their money on, starting with the technical things that are required to support a technical project. You heard this morning about things like the CI/CD and cloud resources that are needed by most of the projects. So OCUDU is no different. There will be some of the funding will go to fund these things. Some of the other things that we are well versed at the Linux Foundation is organizing events, and some of them are developer events, developer forums, maybe similar to this one, where people who are already contributing or are considering contributing or just consuming the projects can get together face to face, have discussions, and actually even sometimes do hands-on coding during the events. There are many other uh, supporting activities that are required for projects like labs and things. Marketing is another um, important aspect. I mean, it's kind of slightly different than marketing a commercial product, but if you think of it, getting the world to know about an open source project, getting more people to adopt it is basically not that different than marketing in some company that sells products. So although we at the Linux Foundation, we don't sell products, we don't sell projects, we don't sell anything basically other than membership. This activity is highly important, and we have good experience. We have people who are focused on marketing and know how to do all these activities that get basically more exposure to the projects and help people understand the value of the projects. So this is kind of another way to look at the highlights of why would someone want to join as a founding member. Um, I think I mentioned most of the things, and this is basically the value of uh, how we see things and why does it make sense for an organization to join. I can summarize everything in a very simple way. I think if you are in some way dependent on radio technology in whatever you're doing, whether it's research, uh, products, integration, end user, you should want to be a part of the foundation because this gives you a seat at the table and a way to control where the project is going and visibility into what's going on in the project. So I think you cannot afford to be left out of this thing, and you must find a way to become part of it. And of course, practices. We don't have to go to the details, just to give you an idea of the membership. It, of course, depends on your company side and type of organizations. And there's also an associate member level that usually is applicable to universities and research organizations. Now, the second thing is I want to talk about is the project itself and how it's going to look like once it goes under the Linux Foundation. So I'll speak mostly about this governance and bureaucracy things that I mentioned in the first slide. So every open source project, at least under the Linux Foundation, has a charter document. So the charter, if you think of it, is kind of like the constitution of the project. It states in high level what the project is about, what is the mission statement. It doesn't intentionally, usually those don't go into too much detail, because what we witnessed over the life cycle of projects, the mission statement might shift a little bit and pivot. So it usually stays at a kind of a high level, and then the community can decide its course based on this high level mission statement. Other things that are covered there are the governance roles, which I'll go into more details, the legal and IP. There's somewhere in the charter, it has to say what would be the license of the project. And it covers aspects of the project operations, like releases, mostly dealing with security vulnerabilities, and so on and so forth. Again, it doesn't go into details that might change over the life of the process. So which month of the year you do the release, you won't find it in the charter. But the fact that the project has periodic releases, this is something that will be expressed in the charter document. The charter, of course, can be amended by a vote of the technical steering committee or the board. It's not encouraged to have too frequent changes to the charter. It should remain basically stable. But if there is a major change happening in the community and it needs to be reflected, it's doable. It might require a slightly a special majority, but charters do change over time if necessary. Then most projects have some sort of a technical steering committee. So the technical steering committee, as the name suggests, is kind of a governing body that makes the high-level technical decisions for the project and make sure that the project goes in the right direction and keeps moving forward. What you can see here are some of the key roles, and as I said, the vision and direction, help with decision making. Usually we strive to have communities reach consensus for decisions, but if there's a need, the TSC can also vote on things, have a formal vote. The TSC normally has a say about the release management, things like deciding when to release, what is the frequency of releases, is usually also something that is being discussed and decided by technical steering committee. In the case of OCUDU, what you see here in the first bullet is just a kind of excerpt from the technical charter of the project. So initially, the TSC will be comprised of the project committers, the current project committers. Over time, the community can elect other members to sit at the TSC. Usually, communities define criteria for who is eligible to become part of the TSC. It involves usually the number of commitments and the level of involvement, and commitments are not just line of code. The community can decide what kind of contribution counts toward being eligible to be a technical steering committee member. There's also in the charter, in many projects similar to OCUDU, there's a TSC chair, just to have someone preside over the meetings, and in rare cases where there's a need for resolving something that wasn't decided already by consensus or by the TSC itself, then the chair can cast their vote as well. It's not like the most important person in the community. It's just usually someone who is willing and able to step up and take that role. It's not a lot of work, but there's some responsibility that comes with that, in terms of how much time needs to be invested and how committed they need to be and how responsive they need to be. So it's kind of an esteemed role, but again, it's not um, it's not the king of the project or anything like that. Another type of mechanism that we see in many communities is a special interest group. Uh, a special interest group is basically a subset of people from the community who are working on a specific topic. It could be a specific time limited issue or challenge that the community is dealing with, and the SIG will group together experts. It could be an ongoing things like the release policy or security, which is a more long-lived special interest group. But basically, the technical steering committee and the community at large can decide when to form this special interest group and what would be the role. And this is just a way to group together people who are working on the same issue. Other two roles that we see in most of our projects is the release manager. And release manager is someone, a member of the community that kind of acts as the point of contact for release management. He actually presses the button for starting the release process, whatever that might be, the branching, the CACD. But he also ensures that all the rest of the community is adhering to the policy decided for the release, and everything that needs to be checkmarked towards the release is getting checkmarked, and the release can be shipped by the community. Sorry. Another important role is security or security manager. It could be a security group within the project, but when security vulnerabilities are disclosed to the community, someone needs to take action, whether immediate or more long term. But usually there is a need for someone or a group of people that will be the kind of contact point in the community for security vulnerability disclosure. And they usually define a procedure of how they will respond to that. What you see here in that link document is actually guidelines from the Linux Foundation about how to do that, because there's no need to reinvent the wheel. There are enough projects out there who successfully tackled that challenge, and OCUDU can just learn from their experience. And I think that's a point about many of the things related to the running the project. You don't have to come up with solutions to things. Most of the things were already dealt with by other communities. Uh, so we at the Linux Foundation can help you find the right procedure to deal with things that you need to deal with. So governance is, again, as I said, this is a very important part of a successful project, and it should be well defined. And this is how you define it. It's part of it is in the charter, part of it is sometimes in some governance folder or files within the repo, and which define all the things you see here. And again, these things may change over time, and we do see them changing over time, but at any given time, they are well documented. So if someone is interested in contributing something, they should be able to find the relevant information and figure out quite quickly how they can start proposing changes and committing changes. So a few words about the transparency that is provided to projects. What we have in the Linux Foundation is a set of tools that is called dubbed LFX. LFX is basically a set of tools that were developed by the Linux Foundation, and they're aimed at supporting the day-to-day activities of the projects and also give a very transparent view of what's going on in the project. I think that it's important. We sometimes ask ourselves questions about projects like how successful they are, who's contributing, who's not, who are the main players, and it's not always easy to find that information. Sometimes have to run some queries on GitLab or GitHub, and the information you get is sometimes very hard to decipher. So what the LFX, part of the LFX is giving you any project very clear dashboards that answers these common questions about who, when, how much, in terms of contributions and the life cycle of the project. So anyone, by the way, can create a Linux Foundation ID and start viewing these dashboards and seeing all the information related to any project. It's a very quick process, and it's free of charge. And once you get this ID, you can log in and start viewing information about any project under the Linux Foundation. As I said, it's all transparent. So this is, I'll just give you an idea about the information you can find there. As I said, these, what is called Insight, provides these dashboards about kind of the, uh, the vital signs of the project. As you can see here, there are graphs about contribution over time. There is a lot of information related to organizational affinity of people who are contributing. So you can see not just the names of the people who are contributing, but also their organizations. So that can give you an idea of how the project is used and how the project is being by who is building the project. Another area where the LFX provide tools to projects is everything that is related to kind of the day-to-day management of the projects, like uh, setting up meeting minutes, meeting recordings. So there's a section under the LFX, which is called the Project Control Center, that has automated tools. So if you want to set up a new recurring meeting for the project, you don't have to deal with Zoom and copying and pasting links to emails and finding those emails. It's all done automatically. You go to this web portal, click a few buttons, and everybody gets notifications about the meeting. They get reminders, they get the meeting notes, the recordings are automatically kept in an archive. So the community can really focus on developing the technology, not with the administrative tasks of handling all those things. And in addition to meetings, everything that is related to the operation of the project is also supported, like and making sure everybody is signing contributor license agreements. There are tools for that as well. So again, the idea is to offload everything possible from the community, which is not the technical creation of the technology. Another section of LFX is the individual dashboard, in which you can find information related to yourself and see what projects you worked on and what projects you are involved in, and so on. It's kind of, think about it as your GitHub dashboard on steroids with a lot more information. A few words about the infrastructure that is provided to projects by the Linux Foundation. So obviously there's somewhere to store the code, and that we find that most projects use either GitHub or GitLab these days. So these resources are available, and our staff will help with the administration of the repos. We provide mailing lists. It's powered by Groups.io, but everything is controlled by this LFX project control center in an easy way. We provide projects with a platform for instant messaging. In most cases, it's either used to be Slack. Now there's more transition towards Zulip as the collaboration platform. And we find that most projects use some kind of wiki space. So we provide that to all projects. There's actually one already set up and ready for OCUDU, and it's hosted by Atlassian Confluence. So if you worked with Atlassian Confluence, you should find it familiar. If you didn't, it's really easy to edit documents. This is where usually we find that projects do kind of not the official outbound documentation, but things that need to be um, documented by the community, like blueprints for new features, discussions about new architectures. So everything goes usually in a wiki, and it's very convenient to work there. But of course, and that is true to almost everything I just described about how projects are run. Um, we don't force basically anything from the Linux Foundation's perspective. So if a certain community has already worked together and used some collaborative methods or tools or anything, and they want to keep using them, we usually find a way to keep that and not force the community to change just because they're going under the Linux Foundation. Unless it's something really non-standard and obscure and uh, that breaks some rules for collaboration, we try to uh, kind of fit any collaboration tool that a community is using or any collaboration method. And I mentioned the marketing. So what does it boils down to? So of course it starts with the project logo. In the case of OCUDU, our marketing team already created one, which you see here. And we probably get used to it. You'll see it a lot. In addition to that, most of the work is around issuing press releases, blog posts, podcasts, anything that will raise awareness to the project, will make more people and organizations see the value of OCUDU, and at the end of the day, convince them that they should be end users and contribute to it. That's kind of the ultimate end goal. There's all projects have a website and OCUDU included, and in addition, as I briefly mentioned, we know how to organize industry day and other types of events, developer events, community events that, again, help the projects gain a broader set of end users and contributors, and again, feed that. It's a big part of feeding that flywheel of getting more and more end users and contributors and growing the project. Um, a little bit about what is OCUDU expected to do with other projects in under the LF. So this is not a, a definitive list or limiting in any way. These are some of the projects that will likely be first targets for collaboration for OCUDU. So the Link Foundation networking is, as I briefly showed, the home of many of the management and orchestration projects, as well as a few data plane projects. ORAN software community, I'm sure you've heard about, is the open source part of the ORAN Alliance, where the different reference implementation for the different components is developed, and they've mostly done work around the RICs. Ether is another project that came in from the ONF when they joined the Linux Foundation. OpenSSF, if you've not heard about it, you should probably look it up, is an open source initiative that deals with how to secure a software factory, basically. So it has many aspects of it. It gives tools and best practices for securely developing and testing software and making sure it's resilient and secure. And another initiative under the OpenSSF is something called the AI Challenge, and it's basically a government-funded initiative that is looking at how to use AI and generative AI to automatically write and test more secure software. So this is something that will also be available as a resource to OCUDU. And of course, anything related to AI and machine learning, there are many projects under the LFAI and Data Foundation and PyTorch Foundation that will likely come in handy. But again, I'm not saying that these are the only projects that OCUDU will collaborate with. And in fact, it might start with collaborating with others, but these are some of the few that are probably worth paying more attention to, kind of a day one aspect. Now, a few words about a role we call the technical community architect. A technical community architect, as you see here, is a person, a Linux Foundation employee that is assigned to a project and is kind of, as the first bullet said, it's basically the main point of contact for a project community inside the Linux Foundation. So everything this person, he or she, does not do the work for the community, but they make sure that the community has the right tools and right access to do everything they need to be successful under the Linux Foundation. So you can see here a few examples of what these people usually do. It's not really limited to that. But again, what you have to bear in mind is that this person is kind of your main point of contact. So if you have a question, you don't know how things should be run under the Linux Foundation or who to contact, things like that, he's your first point of contact. Again, he might not be the one who will do the task at hand, but he will connect you with the right people. Um, so as I said, in the case of OCUDU, we already have a person assigned, LJ Lucy. LJ is here today. Just say hi to the community so you know to put a face to the name. If you will work in any capacity on the OCUDU project, I'm sure you'll meet LJ and get a good service like he provides to other projects. Bear in mind that there's not a one-to-one relations. TCAs are kind of usually oversubscribed with multiple projects. So he has a lot of balls in the air in addition to OCUDU, but knowing him, I know he'll do a great job in supporting this community. And finally, kind of a double click on one of the initiatives under the Linux Foundation networking, which I believe will be very relevant for OCUDU. And this is the 5G Super Blueprint. By the way, at some point, we'll probably need to update the name, like 5G is yesterday's news. I think we should go in a more 6G, next G direction. But this, as you can see, it started a few years ago when 5G was the future. And what it really aims to do is answer the question, okay, there are so many open source technologies out there. There are commercial products. How do I move from a project to a solution, to a working system? And that is what the 5G Super Blueprint initiative was created for. It's answering this question of how you integrate different pieces of open source and how you integrate them with the non-open source pieces of the network to provide a solution for a use case. So as I said, it started, I don't remember how, a few years ago. Sure. Yeah. Thank you. Okay. And what it is basically a platform for people to come up with use cases, come up with their proposed solution or blueprint for that use case, document it so others can kind of learn from their experience and either replicate it as is, or in most cases just duplicate it and use it as the starting point for their use cases. So everything that's being done under the 5G Super Blueprint ends up in a library which contains all the information required for replicating the blueprint, if it's installation scripts, Ansible playbooks, any other type of artifact that is required to set up this environment goes there. So, and of course, written documentations for the end users so they know how to use it, what it does, and how to use it. And people are, from that point on, able to download it and use it as they see fit. And since OCUDU is just part of an end-to-end radio network solution, you need to have a core, you need to have an SMO, you need to have infrastructure to run on. We expect OCUDU to become part of Blueprint or blueprints that are addressing these type of, again, I don't want to call it 5G because it's not exciting anymore, but let's think about the next G use case. So any next G use case can be implemented in this form of a blueprint and documented, and then have other organizations and individuals follow up on that. What you see here is just, again, it's not restricting in any way to using these specific components. These are just example of components. Stuff you see in the core, stuff you see in the SMO. This is just a serving suggestion, but anybody is welcome to come up with their own combination of components. And as you can imagine, the connection points there on the right and left are not all open source. So most of these blueprints usually are integrated with some kind of commercial systems, whether it's testing systems or actual radio systems. So a blueprint does not mean that everything is open source. I mean, usually it will be bookended by some non-open source components. And that's basically all I had in terms of slides, but I'll be around for the next couple of days, so feel free to reach out to me and LJ if you have any questions about how things really work under the Linux Foundation and what our projects are doing and how it's going to work for OCUDU. But I don't know. I think we're at time, but if we have a quick question, maybe I can still take it. Okay.